Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time zone it is, wherever you in the world. It is your Lore Saviour for another Chicago by Night campaign diary recap session thing. And we've got two sessions at the price of one because I have not got round to recording an individual one yet. Also, coincidentally, these two slap together rather nicely, and I will highlight that just for consistency's sake. But where we left off, the Brujah player was going to encounter the Lasombra who was supposed to sire them, who's been causing them all sorts of hijinks. The Lasombra called Inks, or Eduardo, to use his actual name. And that encounter played out fairly similarly to how I intended it to go. He's sort of a bit of a geezer, a bit of ooh, bit of wee sort of thing, a bit of a wild cannon, very un-Lasombra-like. Of course, he's a very punk individual. The ring round the neck sort of thing, as I mentioned, I think in the previous recap session was there. As a little added bonus because I am a dickhead. And they liked that little detail very much. It really pushed some buttons of the player, as it were. And as I said, that played out a lot how I expected it. The Lasombra tried to coerce them into this about, the Brujah are the true anarchs. They all been fighting the fight before the Lasombra ever did. It's a noble sort of thing. Concerningly, the Brujah player was almost enticed by this offer, which is exactly what I wanted to happen, and yet at the same time I didn't want to happen, because part of me thought they would be strong with their morals and they wouldn't dare do anything so inhumane. But of course, I also had it in mind that when the Brujah eventually said no, that the Lasombra would just turn around and said, well, basically, I'm going to make you join. I'm going to tear away everything that you love. I'm going to beat the shit out of your girlfriend, sort of thing, so on and so forth. And his speech was interrupted because he got hit by a van that contained SI hunters in them. I'd expected the Brujah player to run away at this point because he was quite outnumbered. They both were six heavily armed individuals at once. But I made a point of describing how powerful the Lasombra's obtenebration is, or oblivion if we use V5 exclusive terms here, although obtenebration is mentioned as a nickname. Anywho, I had them perform Arms of Araman, and I was going to have them do something kind of gory, but they got two sets of crits, which is fucking incredible, so I had it incredibly gory. And borrowing from the darkness too, I had Inks remove a guy's spine and skull straight from their arsehole. That has stuck with me for a very long time, and it's also quite barbaric. And the Brujah player has sort of hanged around to see if he was worth saving to keep him alive and find out more information. And I remember seeing a little Discord group chat, which I'm also using to refer for some notes. They were just saying to them, "Run! He can look after himself. Run!" The dedication to keep him alive was a little concerning, I do have to say. But I kind of understand the mentality there, just what do you know about my life sort of thing, trying to find out the truth. And so they used Blink to fuck off into the wind, and then they met up with an individual called Rebecca, the monitor of the Inconnu in Chicago. And if you may be wondering why I'm saying this so out in the open, well, Brujah player knows this now, which, as a purist's sake, I shouldn't have made him aware of that, given the role-playing hints in Chicago 1st and 2nd edition, which are up there. But when the Brujah asked which sect you align with, there was a part of me that didn't want to lie to them, but they've just gone through a night, that pit of being lied to, and there was a bit of me, do I tell them or do I lie to them? And they rolled a dice to decide, and so they told them the truth. But I think that ultimately made them feel better overall. So yeah, that happened, and they offered safe sanctuary to their haven, which is in the aquarium, which is on the practically neighbours to the Malkavian player. And they talked a little bit about this and that, and provide a friendly voice to discuss things with. And it's interesting to see if anything's going to come off that in the future. But an alliance of sorts has been presented there, and because of this kinship or allies as it were, I made them a 4-dot Wala. Because I don't think they have as much influence as the Prince do, but Rebecca has quite a bit going for her, for sure. So following this was the Elysium night in question, which is where most of this, the first session would take up, and pretty much the entirety of the second one. But before that, the Lasombra player was speaking to Celia, the other Lasombra, who's now an employee at the Abyss, you may remember. There was an interaction between Celia and the Malkavian player that made Celia feel a bit off, saying that she looked particularly dead and wasn't quite. I felt it was like an insult sort of thing, which confused her because she's young and vampires are supposed to look dead sort of thing. Only the thing with Celia's character, as introduced in Chicago by Night 5th Edition, there you go, it's a bit more on display for you. That said, the fucking mic stand's in the way. Anywho, a part of the character is that she doesn't know how to use Blush of Life, or it's never been told to do that, so to speak. Which, knowing her sire, that makes perfect sense. And that conversation happened between the Lasombra and Celia learned how to perform Blush of Life and how to not stick out so much around mortals, which was a nice education purpose, for the newer Lasombra to an even newer Lasombra. And there's a bit that creeped everybody out. It's like, oh, so if I now look and present myself a bit more as human, does that mean the whispers stop? And that just kind of threw everybody. It's like whispers of presumably oblivion, and if you've read up her character profile, you know exactly what that hints to. But that will come in due course, providing that the players wish to investigate that. If they do, they do. If they don't, they don't. That's fine. It's just a little nugget, shall we say. Then we had the Malkavian player and their sire. They had the whole exchanging of the dresses thing. You may remember that the Malkavian player sent me a bunch of pictures to choose from. I chose one. Malkavian player had made a dress for their sire, which heavily went against the whole Tim Burton thing that I previously described, and had a little tiara that went with it. But the sire of the Malkavian, Dana, wore the tiara with this sort of floral dress thing because it made them happy. Which it was a nice, little exchange. It's nice that the two of them are actually getting on without the need of a blood bond sort of thing. As toxic as that relationship is, shall we say. So the Malkavians and Brujah and Lasombra moved over to the Elysium, some symphony hall thing that I can't remember the name of. And as the Malkavian and sire were sort of queuing up, Malkavian player encountered a werewolf mother and her child, who was pretty pissed that the frenzied Malkavian from a few nights ago had scared the shit out of their child. And Malkavian player tried to be clever here and use dementation to spook the pissed off Garou mother, which was a very bold move, I do have to say. There was weird levels of confrontation there. On the one hand, the mother was Garou, pissed off anyway, as all of them tend to be, just to be crass about it. It's protecting her child sort of thing, and, was aware of what was going on. The Malkavian was sort of upset that they scared the child, but they were very aggressive towards the mother. And attempted to use dementation to try and spook them, which I said, very bold move here. It didn't work. There was a brief exchange, about the werewolf that was in the bin of the abyss, whose name's now been revealed as Reeks of Piss, which made everybody laugh. I've had that sitting in my head since I read up the Bone Gnawers in the revised Tribe book. I just found it an amusing concept. As a deed name, I didn't think that necessarily they all are good things, so to speak. And being the Bone Gnawers, that's not particularly fantastic. So that was probably revealed. And I was expecting the Malkavian player to drop, the whole museum incident. But they didn't. Put a pin in that. We're going to come back to that. So they joined up in the line, and the players all met inside the Elysium, and they sort of scattered into the wind. They were various different individuals. And as I said, this is where most of the two sessions took place. For this part, the first session, for the most part, we had the Brujah player essentially get schooled by the other two about their loyalties and the stupid choice of luring out the Sabbat, because it could have gone a lot worse. They could have died, they could have been kidnapped, could have been all sorts of things. And then they criticised them for potentially joining the Sabbat. And then they all interrogated and pressed a bit more about their allegiance to the Anarchs, and not quite sitting with the Camarilla and just not quite deciding where they should be, as well as a much grander conversation about how corrupt and fucked up everything is, which I absolutely loved, because as I've mentioned in previous spoilery things, I've had this sort of lack of dedication in my mind. It's been a constant theme throughout this chronicle, making a choice. it's great that the players are like finally like having that conversation with them to try and make them aware that, you know, whole of vampire society is fucked. And so far, this Brujah is the only one that hasn't lost any humanity. The other two did quite early on, which has kind of affected that mindset a little bit. But they were very loyal from the get-go. Obviously, the Lasombra player wanted in as desperately as possible, and the Malkavian there is just there because, quite frankly, I don't think they know any better, and they've just been told to stay away from everything else. But this interaction was very tense, it was very heated, and I just loved the grander conversation about the general themes and emotions of vampire, like how holding on to your humanity and the idea of your good morals, your human morals, don't exactly get you very far in the vampire world. And the Brujah just wants a much grander part, like some sort of like negotiator between the sects, as it were, you know, to try and be helpful, but not dedicating themselves truly to one cause or another, like a neutral party. Which again, unless you're somebody like Beckett, who has been around for some time, that doesn't really pan out very well. But I am very intrigued to see where this all goes, because there are many possibilities with this. Now, if they do decide to join the Anarchs, it is possible for this Anarch coterie to exist, because there are examples of this in all 3 editions of Chicago by Night, but they're not particularly popular, and it would make things a bit tense. And I'm also aware that one of the red lines in our, like, lines and veils like green, yellow, red. Red is like betrayal between PCs, and joining the opposite party is a betrayal. And this was also chosen by the Brujah player, but, you know, I'm just having to judge this accordingly because, you know, they're the one who's instigating this, so clearly they're alright with it, so I just need to try and make sure that balance is A-okay. So with the remainder of the first session, Malkavian player went and spoke to Nikolai, who called the sire Dana away, and kind of realised how much of a dick Nikolai was, having the sire Dana wrap round their arm like a sort of twisted version of the Malkavian and sire relationship, really making Dana the little bitch, as it were. I think was something I described. You're talking about how the Malkavian player felt in game, as it were. And Nikolai asserted his dominance, saying that I have the means to killing you both, by using Dominate very easy to make a mortal choke and then bring them back to life again, which is something I've pulled from the encounter that Beckett has with Nikolai in Beckett's To Hard to Die, like very early on. That's always stuck with me. It's part of the reason why I love the character so much, because this boy vampire is a twisted motherfucker. And I absolutely love that. And I've mentioned what those arrangements entail in previous spoiler sessions. And if that's tested by the players are going to get like the full whack of that. And note the plural there. And the first session ended with a conversation with the Lasombra and Maximilian Dorman. And the Lasombra found out just how fucking bad life was for Maximilian. You know, he was of the Sabbat, and he's been with the Camarilla for some 50 years, and he is still considered very much at the bottom, despite his age and everything. The Ventru are just not interested in this, like, waste of skin. That wasn't how it was described, of course, but it was very pitiful from the Lasombra's point of view, and the Lasombra really, you know, crammed that up to their advantage, and is having them speak to Alan Sovereign, the Seneschal, but as you also know, as the players also know, the child of Horatio Ballard, to see if there's anything that he could learn about Horatio Ballard from the child. And we'll be seeing what Maximilian Dorman can dig up from that. And that was the end of that session, really, just sort of leaving the main chunk of Elysium, like, up in the air. And now you see why I am slapping these 2 sessions together. So the next thing that happened is that the Lasombra player was going to go off and speak to Sierra, the other Lasombra that the players would be aware of, the Lasombra from the Sacrifice, and tried forming some sort of like allegiance, corporation sort of thing, because Lasombra sticking together, tough city and all that. Lasombra player invited Sierra to the club. Sierra, as per her write-up, or at least how I've interpreted her write-up, is holding all of her cards close to her chest, like, frustratingly so. Which is totally understandable, given the whole write-up and things, and that caused a bit of frustration with the Lasombra player, because, you know, Sierra doesn't quite trust the Lasombra player, and I don't think the Lasombra player trusts Sierra all that much. But, the Lasombra player is, like, aware that Sierra is the closest thing to becoming a primogen for the Lasombra, and is trying to either support them or swip the roles round or something. I'm not entirely too sure, so it'll be interesting to see what those sessions entail. Malkavian and the Sire spent most of the time together being a normal couple, a word I highlight for a particular reason. It's to do with their ambition. You can check a previous recap session as to why I'm highlighting that here. And the Brujah player spoke to Critias for a bit, learning the results of whether he can continue to attend Sunday school or the Eternal Academy, to use the proper title, given the whole situation with them, the university, and the Sabbat. And Critias was able to inform that Kevin was reluctant to relinquish the duties, as it were, but that's now the case. Brujah player does not have to go and attend the school, as it were. And then it broke for like the Elysium announcement from Kevin Jackson, recapping on the Sabbat incident, the stuff to do with the SI and revealing what Project Blacklight was, how it's a Lasombra focused black op, as it were. There wasn't mentioning of the whole Bart infiltrating the Eternal Academy for one reason or another, which I'm sure the players could work out, and I don't think I need to spell the beans out. Spell the beans? Spill the beans on that too much. And there's also a bit of humour there because this was Annabelle's a thing that's been hijacked, and she had to like insert her little monologues about music and whatnot in my head, and what I described, it was events surrounding the Impressionism of the 1900s in France, the beautiful art movement and music period. If you're that way inclined, I invite you to go and become a bit more cultured and enlightened, as it were, if we use a slight vampire term for it. So then it broke, and there was like gentle music that played, like quartets and piano music and whatnot. There was a nice little heart-to-heart where I described there was a Debussy piece that the Malkavian Sire had realised and went into great detail, like about the last time the Malkavian player was human, which is both sad and tragic and heartfelt, I guess. You know, lots of mixed emotions for sure. There was then a very interesting interaction between the Lasombra player and Portia, because if you may remember from a previous recap session, I do not remember which one it was, in exchange for thaumaturgical protection of the Abyss via a ward against lupines, Portia was to learn Oblivion, and the way that it is done, you have a little bit of a sippy sip from the discipline user, and taught a little bit about it, and then they understand a bit about that discipline. However, this also means that the stages of a blood bond is now in effect, and the Lasombra player is now attempting to play the risky game of seeing how far they can go with this and have potentially Portia bloodbound to them. Which, as I said, risky business with any kindred. And the Lasombra player, both in and out of character, is aware of how fucking powerful that they may well be as a Tremere. And of some of the dice pulls I've had to make for them. And the interesting reaction is that, first of all, when they found Portia was chatting away to a very anxious Nikolai, which confused everybody because it didn't seem that Nikolai could be particularly anxious about anything, but I do have some ideas for that. Then there was the actual interaction itself, where the Lasombra player was just like really flirting with them, and there wasn't any subtlety with it, but then again, the Lasombra player has not been one for subtlety, which is a bit interesting given the fact that they are Lasombra, a clan of the shadows. And the key moment of that was just the conversation itself was wrapping up, so they're going along with it for one reason or another, and they made a comment saying, well, I was going to do this thing at the end of the night, have to change, because they made a point saying that Portia was very glamorous, like making themselves the centre of the show. Again, it changed out of their dress, and the Lasombra player just straight up said, I can help you undress. Which is just I went from naught to fucking shit very, very quickly. And I made them roll for it, not to see how successful it was, but more to see what Portia's reaction would be. And it was favourable, but Portia was like, slow down a little bit. And it made a comment just sort of saying, like, so this isn't a no, not never, but a no, not now. And it's like, rubbed her finger across her lips sort of thing, which is very seductive indeed, and sort of like sauntered off into the night sort of thing. And it was just so out there. We all loved that, and the way that I do XP in this game, I do 3 as like V20 suggests rather than V5. The book's hiding there somewhere. There it is. And then I make the players decide like who gets an additional point for like, it can be a role play, it could be a cool moment. Like it's something I pinched from the channel Caffeinated Conquests, which I might have mentioned before. But anyway, the Lasombra player got that point because of this wowzer moment. Then it focused back to the Brujah player who sort of like went around spreading like the bits of news, the various bits of nice about the Sabbat, what they look like, interactions and so on and so forth. A bit more of Critias because that was interrupted with the thing with Kevin Jackson. Spoke to Anita Wainwright of the Anarchs who was there, which I hadn't mentioned up until this point because quite honestly I'd forgotten that the first session I made a point saying that she was there. I actually had something different planned, but because everybody remembered that I said that she was there, that went out the window, which is fine because there was this very cool interaction talking, about this, that, and the other. The Brujah player had on their person their write-up accounts of the sacrifice, which I think I mentioned at the time, and how that was like a very big masquerade breach sort of thing. And Anita Wainwright was going to like try and work out how to like to mull it over sort of thing. They were also handed a note, whatever, revealing that Genghis was killed by Garou, which, when they read that, that's going to cause all sorts of reactions. That was something else that was revealed. I forgot to mention Malkavian's interaction with the Garou. It was very much hinted at that the Garou mother was the one who killed Genghis, or at least privy to that knowledge, describing like some one-armed person with like a paperclip through their nose, and everybody had worked out that it was Genghis now that had been killed by the Garou. So that was properly revealed, and Brujah wrote that down and handed that to a near-frenzied Anita because she was also made aware of Anthrax, who had been infiltrating the Anarchs, presumably for some time because they'd been getting all their guns and whatnot from this Malkavian anti-tribute, as that was properly revealed now. And was warned that if they encountered them to keep your distance, they are a bloody good shot, which I'm sure my players are going to ignore the first opportunity they get to encounter them. And I would be very interested to see how the players interact with what I have now planned regarding Anita and the rest of the Anarchs. And then it moves over to the Malkavian, who earlier in their second session met up with Harry Milliner of the Hecata, because he was present there. He was actually talking to Kevin and Dame when they arrived, but nobody spoke to him there, which is probably a wise thing to do because, don't want to interrupt a conversation with the prince. But there was a handout that I made about a little cursed photograph that had some spectres on it. I'm going to leave a link to that on my Instagram, where I talk a bit more about the full process of it, purely because I'm really fucking proud of this handout. I like making all these handouts, but that one I'm particularly fond of because of the effort that I put into that, and also it's Wraith-related. But the Malkavian and Harry went to this house, as I believe I alluded to in the previous recap thing. One of the spectres of the Nosferatu, Tammy, and Peter's parents was being eaten by Harry. The other one has sort of been left to the devices, and Tammy has been disposed of, who, when they encountered them, was a wight. And it was the Malkavian player who found the little flash drive with the spicy details, which I've alluded to in the past. There's a bit of conversation regarding them about the Hecata, and also the Malkavian learning that some of the Hecata, the Milliners, are coming over to Chicago, that something bigger is happening, partly to do with this family business, which Malkavian didn't press too much information about, which, is totally fair, totally valid. They respect each other's privacy. And there was a bit of a conversation about like the poor situation of the Nosferatu wight. The Malkavian did like a premonition thing prior to that, and if you know the story of Tammy and Peter from first and second Chicago edition, it's kind of morbid, and I do kind of spill the beans of the overview just there, sort of, but not so much about the embrace because they were missing a success or two. They got 4 successes, so that's pretty good. But the night and that second session properly ended with the Malkavian going back to their haven and finding that their secret haven door had been left ajar. And they made the sensible decision to summon in their coterie mates to come and aid them in their time of need for the umpteenth time that week, which I am quoting directly from my notes here, because this is not the first time that this has happened, and I'm sure it's not going to be the last time that it happens either, because it's kind of been alluded to that the Sabbat are now aware of the location of at least one member of this coterie, and I do have plans about what to do for this section of our game, and that's going to come up in the spoiler section. So if you're one of my players and you were still playing Chicago by Night, politely fuck off. And also, if you're a listener who don't want any spoilers and wants to go into the next Fiend Surprise, fuck off. And if that's the case, do check out the various links in the description below, where you can purchase various different books that I use for my game. Not all of them, because as you can see, I have quite the extensive library. But if you purchase those books with those links, I get some of the money back, and allows me to provide more exciting content for you. And with that out of the way, let's talk about the spoilers, where immediately it's going to carry on straight into this haven, and the players are going to expect like the Sabbat or something there. And there are going to be it's going to be a little game that they're going to play, a very dangerous one. And I'm going to pick at random one of their touchstones. All tied up, tied to a box. They've got to defuse the box, otherwise they die. It's going to be a very Malkavian thing. It's really going to fuck with them. And they're also going to find a little note underneath the bed. A very ominous saying, "It has begun," with a little drawing of a unicorn in there that's come from Anthrax, the Malkavian, which I have mentioned a couple of times. I haven't properly dissected, but the pink-haired individual with the pigtails is Anthrax, who's quite frankly called Anthrax because they were embraced with anthrax. There you go. I suspect, depending on how well successful they are, they're going to have a talk with the Touchstone about what the fuck all has happened, what they can gather from them regarding the Sabbat and how to deal with them thereafter. Or if they die, there's going to be a completely different conversation regarding stains and whatnot. They are going to incur some stains because they've been harmed, they've been frightened, and this is going to really shake up the vampire core as a part of the V5 mechanic. And I'm just very intrigued to see what's going to happen with them, and also particularly how they're going to handle that note, "It has begun," and also how Malkavian player is going to be, reacting to this, because throughout all of this, there have been two safe spaces for the Kindred. We have the Observatory of the Malkavian and the Abyss of the Lasombra, and now we're going to start tearing all that down. You know, it's been their safe places for too long, and quite frankly, they need to find other alternatives, because I feel that's become a bit of a comfort blanket, and I just want to shake things up a little bit and get things a little spicy, as it were. I have no idea what the Brujah's actions are going to be throughout all of this regarding, like, complete response to the Sabbat, but I do know at some point in the following night, the Thursday, they're going to have a chat with their sire about the whole thing regarding Lodin, Olaf, that stuff I've talked about before. And it's going to be very interesting what the Brujah does with that, because if they don't say anything with that, they're going to be breaking a conviction, but if they do, they're going to get themselves potentially Evie killed. So, you know, it's, again, making those decisions, those choices, not putting the two words together, trying to work out which one is the best option, because there are no good options here. It's all a very shitty grey, I guess. And then on that Thursday, we also have the date with Horatio Ballard, which the group has called Horatio Bellend, or Humongous Bellend, as I've called it. So at least I know what the next episode's going to be called, potentially. And I've mentioned this before, what's going to happen, and we're also going to have more introductions with Samantha, the main touchstone of the Lasombra. They are going to be at the restaurant, and I'm going to be imply that Samantha has seen them, and that is going to spark off a very, very interesting conversation for sure. And then after that, the Lasombra player may wish to speak with Gabriella and finally get some of that security sorted, but of course, Gabriella is a simple-minded girl. She just wants a lot of money, a sponsorship for an upcoming stream, money that fucking Lasombra player does not have. And on the Friday night will be the night after that. It'll be the trip to the Midnight Circus. So I suspect that will be not the next session, but the one after that, whenever that may be. But there's also the matter regarding the werewolves. And I mentioned earlier on that there's, you know, I expected a certain reaction to happen and progress forward a bit of a plot point. In a way that I wanted it to. And I was thinking and mulling over about how do I go about doing this. I was thinking about introducing additional NPCs or that could force them into this, but that didn't sit well with me. That kind of goes against my whole ideology. And at the end of the night, I've now got to accept that part of the story does not happen, where the players do not speak to the Garou, and they're probably going to be the last ones to get the fucking drop on the Black Spiral Dancers and the Sabbat making a march into Chicago. Unless, and this is a very big if, the players decide to talk about the whole Garou thing. If they do, then they can go about the means of trying to inform the Garou somehow. If Damien is made aware more about the Sabbat and the Black Spiral Dancers working together, which I think is quite unlikely, Damien will insist that the Brujah will be a middle person between the Camarilla and the Garou to instigate some sort of alliance to push them back. Because Damien was made more aware than the others, I feel, of like wanting to help out and communicate between the two of them. So was Critias, and I imagine the two of them would talk quite a bit. And Critias speaks a lot with Kevin anyway, and Damien is nearby because, you know, the sheriff he would be. So I imagine that at some point it will be suggested that the Brujah player will be the main important party to speak as a neutral party between Garou and Vampire, which is going to be very fucking frightening. But I said I am not going to force that. I'm going to make sure that only comes about if the players make an effort to try and have the Garou work together. Because one of the ideas that was suggested, like how to handle the Sabbat thing via the conversation between Brujah and Critias, is like, you know, you could try and be sneaky, try and be clever, try and go head on, try and like move them towards like, you know, other parties like the SI, the werewolves were thrown in out of character, I have to say. So depending on how all of that happens, is that I need to like respond accordingly. So I'm not forcing it onto them. It's very important that I don't force this onto them. Like, I don't want somebody to walk in and say, hey, I've been spying on you for ages, my bosses want to talk to you sort of thing, or the mother comes back and she's been mulling over something that's been said, because it's Bone Nora, Bin, Club, not coincidence it was owned by a vampire, whatever. I don't think the particular mother would want anything to do with the vampires if she couldn't help it. Although I am now going to make it that she's going to like an elder sort of thing within the sept of Chicago, one of the many septs as it were. You know, or somebody of like reasonable importance who will need some considerable convincing about this cooperation, as it were, to try and put together a meeting of sorts. But if it doesn't happen, then, as I said, the Garou are the last ones to know, and things become a lot more violent by the end, because I do have an end point to this, which will probably upset my players, but I have made it aware that I do have an end point for this, and it will only upset them because, you know, the whole vampire thing like wraps up, and they are really enjoying this, which is cool. So, yeah, that's kind of where we're left at the moment. There's a few plot points open in the air. There's obviously still going to be the stuff to do with the Hecata, and as I said, the stuff with Samantha and the Lasombra player that's going to potentially like put a bit more of a relationship together, or at least some form of a conversation of shock, horror, or whatever. So that's all going to be fun and spicy. But to see how all those pan out, you're going to have to tune into the following recap diary, which will once again air in another 2 weeks. So, as per usual, like, subscribe, and all that general YouTube bollocks. Check out the various links in the description below. Follow me on Instagram, follow me on Blue Sky, and join the Lore by Night Discord server, where you can find the hottest of dank memes and no addition wars, and also a general safe place for the queer community in the world of darkness, which I feel very proud to host such a loving and wonderful community. And, yeah, I have nothing more to add, so until next time, farewell.